Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Inaudy Gil, who is the founder and principal strategist for IIJ Consulting, where she works closely with businesses, community groups, and organizations on building intentional and strategic culture change. Born in the Dominican Republic, Inaudy immigrated to the United States as a child and has lived in the Hudson Valley, where I also live, since 2003. She holds a master's in science from SUNY Hunter College and holds an executive certification for diversity and inclusion from eCornell. And she has worked tirelessly for over 20 years on eliminating oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, and gender inequality in her community. Welcome, Inaudy. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's really so lovely to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, excellent. Well, before we dive into nonprofit leadership-y things, I'd love for you to share a little more about yourself personally.
Absolutely. So I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD, which means I need to do a lot of things at once, or I am just not okay. So I have multiple jobs. I sit on 4 different boards. I've got 3 children, a dog, a cat, lots of plants, and a really busy life. But I wouldn't have it any other way because I like to be involved and I like to keep myself busy.
I love it. And thank you so much for sharing that. Speaking of inclusion, I'm always a big advocate of neurodivergent and neurospicy. It's a term I love. I am just surrounded by people in my life who have ADHD.
We're everywhere.
Other things as well. And just like you said, there are, certainly challenges, but there are so many strengths. And it sounds like you are really embracing that. And I love that you're sharing the strengths that come with that as well.
Absolutely. We have to destigmatize these things. We have to talk about them. They're real. They impact us. And we all have all sorts of different issues, but yet we can also be successful. We can also be amazing individuals and just good human beings at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we've kind of dove right into, inclusive leadership, leading by example. Maybe.
Yeah.
People who are maybe jumping in and interested in inclusive leadership, but let's bring them along. What, in your mind, how do you define inclusive leadership?
Yeah. So I define inclusive leadership as a style of leadership that really focuses intentionally on leveraging diversity within their teams, on making sure that they help identify the strengths of everyone in their team, and that they are intentional about learning and making sure that they are also on top of themselves and their biases. And we'll talk all about that in a little bit. But that's what inclusive leadership is about. It's about leveraging your biggest asset, which is your employees, the humans that we work with, and taking their differences and seeing them as assets so that we can then create a culture where everyone feels a high, authentic sense of belonging, a sense of value, and that they can bring their full selves to the team.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that. I always love using the term leverage. I don't hear it used enough in the nonprofit space.
Yeah.
And that bringing your full self, whenever I hear, I'm such a believer that, like, having inclusivity makes us better organizations, makes us stronger, in addition to being better for just humanity. And I love the way you phrase that, because when you think of, oh, bringing their best selves, the best
Mhm.
version of them into the workplace, it makes it sound so obvious as a win-win.
Right. Right. But
And
it's
the
not
ones we
always.
use matter. That's right. That's right. So let's talk about some of the challenges that come up around inclusivity in the
Yeah.
workplace and trying to nurture inclusivity with leaders.
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges and a lot of both internal and external challenges that come up for leaders. I mean, we can start with the external one, which right now, for example, is the political attack on DEI, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how there is really a lot of misunderstanding about what is DEI and what it's not, or how it
Yeah.
should be done, right? I mean, we've all heard of programs that are just not effective, but not only are they not effective, but they can be harmful. So that is real. That is a thing. But when we do diversity and inclusion work the right way, when you are looking at everyone's differences and everyone as assets and what they all bring to the table, that can bring, that can create better spaces, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that can be one challenge, the external and the lack of understanding of what really is inclusion work, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to internal challenges, we are the ones that get in our way. If we don't understand something or a someone or a culture, or if we haven't had access to different cultures, if we haven't had access to specific cultures, especially that people that we serve, especially, right, nonprofits, if our biases are unchecked, if we are not doing continuous work on our beliefs and our values and our stereotypes and just the way we think overall, if we're not continuously checking in with ourselves, right? Having some insight and thinking about considering what things do I need to unlearn,
Yeah.
right? So the same way we get prepared for a job, the same way we have to prepare for ourselves too, and how we lead as leaders. And that is the number one, I would say, challenge is getting beyond ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. Can you share some like specific examples of what does it look like to be aware? Because I've heard people, talk about, I'm thinking about clients of mine like, oh, there's being aware of their bias. So they're trying to be not biased super hard, which seems like, it seems like an impossible task to
Yeah.
be not biased. But what does this look and feel like in reality? Let's start with that internal dialogue and then we can
Absolutely.
go out.
So it is putting yourself on check. It is being present and mindful of when you have an interaction with someone and you get a feeling, right? We have to ask ourselves, especially if it's a negative feeling, I would say. So, for example, it could be you and I meet for the first time, and there's something about you that just rubs me the wrong way. And all of a sudden, I'm just going to start treating you that way because something you said, something you did, I can't identify it. When we're not aware of those immediate thoughts, we are not aware of how they impact our interactions and then our relationships. And in
Yeah.
turn, the services we provide, right?
Yeah.
So if a service provider gets triggered off of something by a potential client, because that client reminds them of someone, or they're making assumptions about their race or about their gender or age or religion or whichever one of the identities is, you treat them differently. You
Yeah.
don't realize that you treat them according to what your beliefs are. So
Yeah.
being intentional and being an inclusive leader requires you to actually stop and say to yourself in that moment, all happening at the same time. So it's a lot of work. And saying to yourself, maybe I'm going to put a pin on it because I can't do the work right now, but later on, I'm going to
Right.
consider what about this person? What about this interaction just turned me off and just made me feel a certain way? And
Yeah.
the same can be said about a positive interaction. We hit it off
Yeah.
immediately, right? We're
Right.
smiling, we're, being intentional and aware of our own biases is also considering, I wonder what about this person made me feel comfortable. made me feel like
Yeah.
I'm in a trusted environment, right?
Yeah.
And in turn, we also consider safety, right? What about this is a safe environment, etc. That's the intentional work that we need to do. And the more we practice it, both in the positive and in the negative interactions, the more we realize how much we have to unlearn and how much we have messages in our brains from when we were a child, or messages that seep into our brains from current relationships or even past experiences, right? Because bias
Yeah.
also does come from past experiences, or the things that we read, or the things that we watch.
Yeah. So you need to learn to listen to your almost instinctual reactions, positive or negative, especially if like you're meeting someone for the first time or, newly knowing somebody, I can imagine. And just ask yourself, take that intentional moment to be, curious about yourself. Where did this come from? Does it come from a bias? Is this helping or hurting? Right. Like, or maybe there was something that did happen,
Right.
and you had a good
Absolutely.
reason, but maybe you discover, oh, I didn't really have a good reason. Or maybe
Right.
I
Or
like this
maybe I'm
person because they're like,
generalizing, or I'm
yeah,
stereotyping, or I'm
yeah,
making assumptions out of
yeah,
someone without being well informed. Right. And usually
yeah,
that's what
yeah,
happens. We make assumptions. Our
yeah,
brains are just wired to be that way, right? They're wired to make really fast decisions without us
yeah.
taking into consideration all the pieces of information, because then it would be too much.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you mentioned that. Like, when people ask me about, biases, I'm like, well, I think they're always going to be here because I think that we pretty have much learned, like, in many ways,
Yes.
our brain is like a difference engine. It's looking for ways to categorize differences, to simplify
Correct.
decision making. So it's kind of like it feels counter, it's just not natural to try to eliminate
It's not
bias.
natural. It's not possible. None of us are
Right.
perfect.
But we
Even
can
with it.
recognize it. We
Exactly.
can learn about these things. And I just want to go on a tangent for a second because I find biases really interesting. There are all sorts of other brain biases that I think are so important and fun to learn about. At least they're fun for me, like recency bias and loss aversion bias or sunk cost bias, right? There's all these different ways that our brain works. And I think the more we understand all kinds of biases our brain have, the more we have the ability to kind of like back in the driver's seat and get
Absolutely.
more things that we want. Because often we have a lot of biases, not just cultural and racism related biases, but we have all sorts of other biases that are actually sabotaging our success in business and personal life. And
It's
it's cool to
true.
be a
It's
student of
true.
the
We can
brain.
have biases against people based on appearance, based on, their accents, based on geographic location, based on,
Yeah.
the type of work that they do. There can definitely go beyond, right? The
Yeah.
identities. And another tool that I just thought of as well is, if you're not there yet where you can kind of instinctional consider the thought and the feeling, there are tools out online that you can take. There are tests. So Harvard University came out a couple decades ago with bias testing, and they've got tons of tests that you can take for free. And
Yeah.
it's part of their university, part of their program, and thousands of people have taken them. I've taken a couple myself and have been surprised at the biases that come up. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you can,
Yeah.
spend a few minutes and they ask you all these questions and you're supposed to answer really quickly. And it just shows how your brain responds to
Yeah.
images, responds to words a certain way without you even thinking, without you even considering. And once we know it's there, right, then it becomes important for us to do the work. So
Yeah.
if I identify that I have bias against, you know, I don't know, people who like Poland spring water, right? And that's an identifiable thing. Now I'm like, oh, and I have to consider why, right? Part of what I also have to do is learn about Poland Spring, learn more about people who drink that water and expose myself. Because the more we
Yeah.
expose ourselves to groups of people or things that make us uncomfortable or things that we are just not very knowledgeable of, the more comfortable we become in spaces with them. And then the less biased we are because our experiences change.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. I've had many of those moments in my own life, but two that are kind of coming to mind. One is an old one. My ex-husband, father of my wonderful child, he's Puerto Rican. His family's Puerto Rican, and much of the world sees him as a tall Black man. He's 6'5". He's got the shaved head, right? So, and he's got dark skin. And, sharing a life together, there's so many things that became so obvious as like a mixed race couple. And I just became so comfortable in our home environment. We would joke about racism and things. But it was about developing that level of comfort to really like call things out, and blatant things happened to us. Like I was once pulled over I was speeding. I was driving. It was me and my husband in the passenger seat and my dog in the back seat. And instead of, the normal, like, do you know how fast you were going? The police officer looks over at my husband and looks back at me and says, "Are you okay, ma'am?" As like implying I'm being abducted or something.
Wow.
And I, of course, immediately recognize like this huge amount of racism that's happening right here. And I turn on and use the reverse, for those of you who are listening, I am a white female. So I use all the little like biases of like innocence that we inherit, especially as women, at least in my generation, like, right. You lose like the little girl voice. But at the end, that was like an intense moment of like navigating that. And, so blatant things happen, and then they make all the subtle things so much easier to talk about. And these days my son is neurodivergent too, and he has ADHD and he has autism, dyslexia, and dysgraphia and anxiety. Those are his diagnoses. And he has given me permission to share that, which is important too, right? And we don't want to disclose for people who aren't comfortable with that, but he's a big advocate of people knowing. He finds it really helps them understand him. But where people misunderstand him all the time, when he gets stressed out easily, and when he's stressed, his behavior often looks like defiance. And I spend a ton of time educating educators that what they are seeing is not a behavior problem, but a kid who's in panic mode, right? They're seeing an emotional regulation problem. And you have to treat those really differently, because when, a kid is in panic mode, they need to calm down, and there's no amount of like traditional behavior consequences that are going to change that. It's like he needs a calming intervention, not some sort of more logical behavior. Like if you do this, then this thing will happen, because he's not in control of going into panic mode very well. Like that something is evolving as he learns. So I just wanted to share for folks, because I always feel like it's important to share the examples you can in your life.
And I think those are so important and relevant, by the way, right? Because as leaders, it's important for us to hear the different experiences of different people, right?
Yeah.
Have to learn from each other. We can't just pick up a book or watch a movie or watch a film or read an article. Those are all really great and important things to do too, to learn about others. But I think being, and I use the word a lot, intentional, right? But being intentional about hearing from others and tell me about your experience, because I don't only see Sarah as a white woman who has had her white woman experience, but I see Sarah as someone who has also experienced being married to a Black man and what that is like, right? And also Sarah, who has heard firsthand and witnessed firsthand the different treatment that Black men receive, and who is a parent to someone who's neurodivergent, right? And, when I think about neurodivergency and I think about the staff and the teams that we work with, the people that work for us, it would go such a long way if leaders were more involved in understanding some of these things, because then they would also see, oh, this is not so-and-so being defiant. This is so-and-so having a challenge with emotional, regulate.
Yeah.
I love to share with me how, eye contact is sometimes really difficult for me, right? My medication has worn off. Not only will you catch me not doing eye contact, but you will catch me doing 5 million things at the same time, not sit and focus on just one, right? And if we're
Right.
patient, I am going to interrupt you like 4 or 5 times because I am having a really hard time regulating myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of someone and my staff member has all of these things, right? And I know that they're neurodivergent. I happen to have that information. I know I can lead them accordingly. And I won't
Yeah.
take it as disrespect, or I won't take it as them failing to do something, or we'll be better at managing them, right? And we will go outside of our cookie cutter box of managing everyone the same. We can't do that. We can't. We can't manage everyone the same. Everyone has different needs. Everyone
That's right.
has backgrounds, right? So I think it's super relevant. And fun fact, I was married, my ex-husband is a white man.
Excellent. So know that world. Yeah. And I love the idea of like getting to know your staff and their experiences and creating a culture where people share these things. You'll discover people have strengths. Like, like I have a lot of neurodiversity strengths, a lot of knowledge there, a lot of firsthand experience. I have a lot of racism related strengths from having that firsthand experience. And one thing I've learned, you probably learned too, is I have mixed race child parenting experience, which I have found is probably the least frequent that I run across other people who've had those experiences. And that's a trip too. My son's skin is lighter. To me, he looks like, my own bias is he looks like my family to me.
Mhm.
He looks like a white kid. But I know that every Latin person who meets him goes, he I know, right? That's their, but they see that part of him. The truth is he's a mix of his parents, but he's also had that experience where mostly white people, adults and children, have said to him when they see him and his dad, that can't be your dad.
That must be.
And that's hard. He takes it in a lot of stride, but that's hard.
Just take it in stride and not, it's those microaggressions that we all experience that
That's right.
just, dust off.
And I'm sure adopted children face, if they're of a different race than their parents, face that and other unique challenges. But the more you experience, the more you get good. I think that's what we were talking about before, at identifying all the other areas where you can become more aware.
Absolutely. And to your point of, as leaders, making space for these kinds of conversations where people can just be themselves. And we don't have to call them anything. We don't have to call them, it's DEI time, it's inclusion time. It's no, but it's
Right.
going back to the days of icebreakers, the days of, during every single meeting, we're going to have a little bit of an icebreaker. And it's about getting to know each other. But it's
Yeah.
aiding that space, right? It's
Yeah.
space so that people can talk to each other, so that we can humanize ourselves as well, so that we can hear what's going on with your life, right? And learn
Yeah.
from each other and about each other directly and in the moment versus just getting down to business and focusing only on the reports that are due, the fiscal year ending, the this, the that, but really going back to that, again, our people are our most valuable asset. And we have
Yeah.
conversations with them and make the space where they can have conversations with each other as well.
I love that. And that leads me, I feel like I have this theme this week that I've been talking about throughout things like so often we take complex issues and assume that the solutions are really complex, but often the solutions to complex issues are surprisingly simple. And I think you just named one, right? Like it doesn't have to be some, fancy DEI training time and specialist. You could just start every meeting with asking people like, what's going on in your life? I know I always advocate for a segue, that kind of thing into a meeting because there's a lot of studies that show that helps people be present and think better in the meeting. But I'm always surprised. One of the activities I like to do is called a high-low. A high from your week and a low from your week or whatever time period. And then sometimes I like to specify a personal or business, or one personal high, one business high, work high, one personal low, one work low. And as I introduce this to other organizations, I'm always surprised how many people are like, Oh, I never say anything about my personal life at work. And this is their first time sharing anything. And it's usually like I can see how emotional and valuable and important it is in the room. Even little things like, oh, a high this week as I was packing up my kid to go to college, right? That's not little, but it's a simple thing and it connects people. So I'd love to just go down this rabbit hole a bit of like, what does it really look like? What are the things we do to create an inclusive culture and productive culture, and how do we know we're there?
Excellent question. First thing is absolutely these icebreakers. You have high low, I have new and good. That's the name of
Sure. Mhm.
it is a 2 to 4 minute exercise that can be done before a board meeting. It can be done every single time. You don't even have to come up with new ones because just like high and low, it's actually giving the opportunity for people to share something new and or good about their life right in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So they can share anything that they want to, and the room just lights up. People are happy and smiling. The energy immediately shifts. People are happy to talk about something that's important for them, right? And people
Yeah.
happier listening and hearing from their colleagues. When we don't have these ideas or we want to try a new one every time, ChatGPT is our friend. AI is our friend, right? Google some great icebreakers for getting to know each other, great icebreakers for team building, right? So definitely activities are important. I think staff development is also a really good way of creating inclusive spaces. And staff development can look in a few different places, in a few different ways, right? But bringing in people to talk about different skill sets, right? And not only focusing on, the skill set. For example, if you are a domestic violence agency, not just focus on intimate partner violence, right? But
Yeah.
staff on other issues that are happening in our community, on issues that our clients are facing, different issues, right? Cultural humility, cultural competence on different communities, right? Especially if we have a diverse community and where we are a part of.
Right.
Opportunity for someone from the outside, a consultant, a professional, a trainer to come in and give folks more information and more knowledge can go a really far way because
Yeah.
we want employees who are engaged, right? And so
Yeah.
they're part
Yeah.
of your question of how do we know we've gotten there? You've got engaged employees. One of the ways that employees are engaged is psychologically. And sometimes psychologically availability depends a lot on people's confidence. And if confidence in the role that I play in my job, if I don't have the skills that I need, or if I am stagnant and don't see where else I can grow here or how else I can grow, I won't be engaged. I will just,
Yeah.
right? So part of inclusion is employee engagement. It is.
I love that. Yeah.
How do we engage our employees so that they can feel not just like they're a part of the team, right? Because that's the belonging
Yeah.
piece that's so, so important, but that they're also valuable. They're valued and that they're valuable, right? They feel
Yeah.
their skill sets. They feel like they're a good match in the position that they're in, right? They feel like the mission of the agency is tied to close to their own, right? And the values. But those are all constant conversations that can be had. So I'm a huge proponent of professional development, selfishly and biasedly, right? Because that's part of what I do in my consulting. I provide professional development, but that's because of that, right? It's
Yeah.
the communication, conflict resolution, whatever it is, bring people in and provide that education. And how do we know when we get there? Well, I'm an overachiever and I don't believe in 100% ever, right? So I think we all have lots of work to do, but I would say your employees get to tell you that.
Mm.
Survey.
Yeah.
Ask your employees,
Yeah.
how's our work climate? How's our culture here? What is
Yeah.
going well? And what are the things to improve on, right? What things would we benefit from working on? Your employees will definitely be very honest, right? As long as you've got a culture where people feel safe enough to be honest
Yeah.
and authentic, right? Because they know that they will be heard. So that's also part of the inclusion in the inclusive leadership piece, is that you're not just asking for people's opinions, you are actually taking them into consideration, and you are listening, and you are putting things in practice, and you are demonstrating your presence
Yeah.
and demonstrating that you are willing to make changes or willing to do things that are brought up. So that's really important too.
Yeah. We're pretty much at time, but because I think some people are in that position where they feel like they know people don't fully feel safe, or maybe they're not the top leader. What are your tips for folks who want to take those first steps in making an environment more safe?
Yeah. So I would say assess what you have, right? So you want to assess two things: assess your leadership skills, and then assess your climate as well. Part of what I inclusive leadership program is I have tools. I give them assessments where you ask yourself these questions. Do I lead this way? Is, communication part of what I always lead, et cetera, right? But definitely self-assessment is important, because then you're able to kind of identify. And sometimes you can do that through getting a coach, right? Some
Yeah.
people, get executive coaches to help them figure out, am I being the best leader I can be? How can I be better? Right. And then it's also assessing your climate, and then assessing and asking the questions. And when you identify that you've got different employees, some who, are top performers, those are the ones we ignore because they don't need our attention. They are our top performers. Then you've got your average ones, right? Who we tend to ignore sometimes as well, because they're just performing as we need them to, right? Just as. But then you've got your low performers, and we end up putting all our attention and all our energy on the low performers, forgetting that those other two groups need us as well. So really
Mhm.
finding a balance of how do we make sure that these three interact so that these three can help each other as well, right? And that we can figure out how do we help create better spaces, safer spaces for the low performers to tell us what's really help you, but also safe spaces for the high performers to share some of their skills and where are they getting their energy and their passion from, right? And then
Yeah.
share throughout the organization.
Yeah. So, so important. I'm so glad you brought that up. And it reminds me of a story. It's a story about how biases emerge. It's an old research study from like the 70s, maybe even older. And they were studying, it was a sexism, boys versus girls. I don't know that the transgender was even in the language there, but basically the very short version is they found that because girls their brains tend to develop a little faster than boys in the elementary age, the girls seem like the high performers, to put in the language you were just using, and the boys appear more to be struggling. And so the teachers would give the boys more attention, and therefore the boys would actually end up getting a better education. And like by the time I think they left high school or whatever the time period was, the boys had actually received significantly more support and education. And now we have an education bias emerge in favor of the boys and not in service of the girls, because at a younger age, they looked like the high performers who didn't need any help. And then they don't get used to getting help. They don't get used to asking for help. And then when the playing field starts to level out, the girls, and this is an old study, right? So some cultural things I'm sure have changed, although I'm sure in other ways they haven't. The girls then, they're late high school, college age, and they don't have the ask for help skills. They don't feel comfortable with that. They have biases and assumptions that I'm just supposed to figure it out on my own. And anyway, it's a study. I forget what book it is in. It might be in Blaming the Victim. It's an old book, but these things are so important. And I remember that research study and that's taught me to like just that example that you shared, right? Don't just focus on your low performers.
Like inequity there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, equality versus equity. Equity is treating everyone based on their needs, but you're still treating, right? You're still offering education to everyone. It's just in those cases, the boys that needed a little extra help got the little extra help, but that doesn't take away from the help that the girls still need, right? That's
Yeah.
between equality and equity.
Excellent. Well, we better wrap up. But before we do, for those folks listening, Who should be reaching out to you, and what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so you can find me through my website or on email, Inaudy, Inaudy, at iijconsulting.com, or my website, iijconsulting.com. Anyone who is interested in having me come in and do, consultation around professional development needs and trainings. I do a series throughout the year. So quarterly, I run an inclusive leadership program here in the Hudson Valley. And my next one is November 7th. If anybody wants to be part of that program, it's an all-day training. But I spend a lot of time with agencies. I bring that training to their organizations the same way that organizations send representatives, because it's all about maintaining that education, right? And that hunger for more education around inclusive leadership. But anybody who is any professional looking for training opportunities and staff development can reach out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Inaudy, and thank you out there for listening and everything you do in your communities. The algorithm is biased in podcasts to those podcasts that get likes, subscribes, and reviews. So you can help make bias work in all of our favors by doing one or all of those things wherever you're listening to this podcast, and then the algorithm will send it to more like-minded people and just reinforce the bias even more, hopefully in a good way. Until next time, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.